Greetings, programmers, and welcome to our series tutorial on how to create a game. In this case, we're going to create the game of memory, which is a classic childhood game, which a lot of you have played, I'm sure. This is not us playing a stream on a game. Of course, it is a stream of us making the game completely from scratch in Scratch. And we're going to do this in a series of videos. We'll make each of the videos about 15 to 20 minutes in length, so you can watch as many as you like. And hopefully you can follow along with us. Feel free to pause it at any point, create your own game of memory, and make all the things that we make, but make it your way. And in this particular tutorial on how to make the game of memory, we're not necessarily going to cover all of the ins and outs of the way of working with the program of Scratch. I have a series of tutorials for doing that, and I recommend that if you haven't, if you're new to Scratch or you haven't seen those before, that you probably watch at least the first 6 of those. They'll give you the appropriate background before we dive into making this particular game. And I say we this time because it's not just me making the game today. I brought along a special guest with me today. Her name is Fluffy Wishes. Say hi.
Hello.
Fluffy Wishes is my daughter, and the great thing about Fluffy Wishes is she's the one who introduced me to Scratch. So we'll get a little bit of her stories, and we'll get a little of her input on how to make this game as we go along. But let's get started. What do you think?
All right.
All right. So Fluffy Wishes and I are in my account. This is the opening screen of Scratch, and you can see that the only project I have in here right now is the beginner's tutorial. So let's start with a brand new project, and we do that. Click the new project button. And we're going to get the screen that tells us to have an editor and be able to work with that. And I hope everybody's familiar with the game of memory. If you're not, let me describe it really quickly. Of course, it's the game where you put in a bunch of little tiles, right? 2 players?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what did the players have to do?
Well, they have to flip over the tiles, and they have to try to match up 2 pictures.
That's right. So the tiles are turned over face down. You only see the back. You don't know what the pictures are on those tiles. And there are a set of pictures, and there are 2 of each picture on that board, right? And the first player goes first and gets to pick 2 tiles, flips one over and then the other. And if they match, they get to go again. They get a point for that. They get to go again. If they don't match, it's the next player's turn. No points, and it's up to them. And now the next player has been able to see some of those things that are on that board, so they have an advantage. And it goes back and forth until you've cleared the whole board. Well, obviously we don't need a cat.
No.
So we don't need this sprite. We'll use him, but we'll get rid of his costumes. What I like to do when I make a game first, Bill, is I like to start with the stages. One of the best things to do is actually kind of design how you want your game to look. And once you've got a little bit of an outline going, then you can actually start making the things behind it. And I think that we're going to have 2 major screens in our game. The first one will be the introductory screen, and it will let you say what size of a board you want. Okay? And the second one will be the tiles themselves. Okay?
Okay.
So let's draw what that might look like a little bit. Let's hide our Scratch cat so we don't see him for right now. But inside of the stage, we'll select that, and we're going to have a couple of backdrops. And all I'm doing here is this isn't what we're going to really see in the final game. We're just putting down the things that we want it to look like, and we'll make it more pretty later on. Okay?
All right.
But in the meantime, I'm going to convert it over to vector mode because I want to put some text and draw some things in there. The first thing we're going to put in is the name. At the top, I think it should say memory. You can select which font you want it to be. Let's just make it Scratch font for now. Scratch font is a bit funny looking, but we can put that there, and then we can make it whatever size we want it to be. It'll be right there. Now, what I'm going to do on this screen here, it's always 2 players, so you don't really get to pick that. But perhaps we can pick the different sizes of the game board, right? You could make it pretty small. You can make it maybe 3 by 4. You can make it bigger, 4 by 5. So in 3 by 4, there's 12 tiles, right? So there's only 6 matches. That's pretty easy. 4 by 5 would have 20. 5 by 6, how many would 5 by 6 have?
5 by 6 would have 30.
Yep, so there's 15 different kinds of images that we'd have to have. So this is the screen that people are going to see when they come in right at the very beginning. I think what we'll have inside of here is 3 buttons, basically. You'll have 1, oops, let's get rid of that, 2, 3. And what these will basically say inside of them is I'll have a thing that says press a button to begin, and it will say small, medium, and large. And as soon as they click on one of those, that will take them to their next screen. So this is what I would call the title screen. This is where you first come in, right? Now we're going to want a new backdrop, one that we're going to paint ourselves, and that's going to be the game board screen. So let's put that in there. And the game board screen needs to have a few things, right? One is that we need to know which player's turn it is, right? So playing player, if I could type, needs to be at the top. Oh, we need to convert this to a vector as well. So let's get rid of that. Start as a vector. So we paint that one, convert it to a vector, and we'll call it our game board again. Now we want our playing player, we want that to, it's got to say player 1 turn, something like that. Player 2 turn, it's going to have to keep changing right up there. Then what we're going to need too inside of this one is we're going to need a little score. So we're going to need the player 1 score in one corner, right? And that would show up about right there. And the player 2 score maybe in the other corner. Move that down. We'll get rid of all this stuff later.
All right.
And there'll be a little box for that too. And then what we want in the whole rest of this here is this is where our actual tiles are going to be. So we're going to reserve all that space inside of there for the game tiles themselves. So got an idea of how this works? What do we see first?
Well, first we go into the start screen and you can pick how big you want your board to be. And then once you've picked how hard you want your board to be, you go to your game board and there's whose turn it is, the score of both of the players, and the board with all of the tiles on it.
I think there might be one little other thing. We need to check when somebody wins and say, hey, you player 1 won or player 2 won or something like that. But I don't think we need to really necessarily draw that one out. We know what that looks like. Okay, so let's start with the title screen. Let's actually make the things that we need it to be, right? And what we really need here is some buttons. Scratch has a nice way of doing that. Buttons tend to be sprites. So let's just take Mr. Cat here and let's turn Mr. Cat into some buttons instead. So let's just get rid of him. He's gone. The nice thing that Scratch actually happens to have inside of itself is some templates for buttons. So actually, if you wanted to create a new one from a library, it comes up here and shows you the library, and you'll see it actually picks a subset of, it has more than this, and sometimes it doesn't show you all of them, but it's got some nice buttons in here. So here's some choices. I think we should probably pick between one of these 4 across here, because we're going to put some text inside of it. So which one would you like?
I think I like that orange one.
The orange one?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start with this orange one. So we'll select button 2B, and we tell button 2B to come in, and there it is. And once we've done this, it's easy for us to just change the size to make it be whatever we want it to be. We just kind of drag it out, make it a little bit bigger. And it's in vector mode here, so we can just go ahead and grab some more text. And inside here we can say small, right? So this is a small game board. And now small is a little too small, so we'll make it a little bit bigger, and there you go, small. So that's a button. Pretty easy, right? It's not showing up on our game board because we told it to hide, so let's show it back again. That looks about right. What do you think? Look pretty good?
Yeah.
All right. So how many options did we say we're going to have? Small, medium,
And large.
Large. So there's 3. And I think we can actually do that with the exact same sprite, because each one of those buttons is going to do something pretty similar. So the code behind it is going to be about the same. So there we go. We'll change that to our small. And actually, see that? We right click on that, we got duplicate. And all we have to do, because it's a vector text here, is go ahead and pick our text button and just make that medium. Right? Let's try that. It's not very centered, is it? Let's try and make that a little more centered, like that. Small, medium. And that is now the medium button. And we're going to duplicate it one more time. And this is going to be our large button. Is it okay if they're all orange?
Yeah.
Yeah. Still looks okay? All right. Now, obviously, it's only going to come out in one of those sprites, right? When it begins, but we want all three to show, which means we need to use clones to make that happen. So the thing that we need to do, I think, is that we need to stop working inside of these backdrops now and start getting to writing some actual scripts. I'll make this a little bit bigger so people can see it this time. Now, when any program starts, the first thing that they have to do is respond to when the green flag clicked, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that 3 of those buttons show up and that they do the right thing. That means I like to have only one when the green flag clicked. So what I want to do actually is what I do in most of these games is to do some broadcasts to start out. The first one I want to do is initialize data. Okay? And all of our sprites are going to do whatever variables they have. They're just going to initialize that data inside there. And then inside of our second one, this is where I want to tell it to layout title screen. Okay? And during the layout of title screen is when we're going to make the buttons show up in the right spots.
You capitalized your I.
I did. Oh, that's very bad. Can't have that, can we? That look better?
Much better.
All right, thank you. By the way, Haley, how did you get into Scratch? What is the first time that you used Scratch?
Well, I didn't know about Scratch, but one time in school we were having a programming lesson and we used Scratch, and I thought, this is great. And I went home.
What were you working on then?
We were doing, we had like, they gave us little, like, I don't know, like instruction packet things, and we had to go and make the game that was there. And I really liked coding all of that, and so I came home and I used my account that I had used at school, and I made some new things on Scratch, and I kind of liked it better because I could make my own stuff and I didn't have to do what the
That's
little
right.
yeah.
You did a lot. I remember you doing that, working on a bunch of your own projects.
It's really fun to just start with nothing and then be able to turn it into a game that's fun to play, and it's just really cool.
So what I've been doing while she's been telling us about Scratch and how she got there, and really it's how I got there too, because it was Fluffy Wishes that showed me how to use Scratch and taught me to begin with. Is I've created 4 variables. Number, rows. And you notice that 2 of those variables were for everybody, the number of columns and number of rows. Oops, look at that, no space. And 2 of those, columns to select and rows to select, were done inside here. Were just for this sprite. Which, you know what, we needed to rename that sprite. Size buttons. There you go. So we need to set, because the initialized data we need to set for the ones that we need to select properly, they're for this button. We do need to set the columns to select and the rows to select for this button. And it always starts out with its costume being the small one. And what did we say? It was going to be 3 by 4 for small. That means 3 rows and 4 columns. So that's the data that we need to set. And in the stage, we also need to set data. So when it receives initialized data, it needs to set the number of columns and the number of rows.
Shouldn't it just carry over the variables?
Yeah, so it does from time to time when you run the program. I want when we very begin to make sure that we set everything to what we think is the initial set of data.
All right.
Yeah, I feel like I have more control over the program if every one of the variables does what I think it should at the very beginning. So here we are. We now have this set, and what we need to do is we need to make a clone, right?
Create clone of myself.
Create clone of myself, right. Actually, one other thing we probably ought to do is set the location of this particular one.
Oh, yeah.
So that is in here. We want to set the x and y. We want y to be 0. I don't know what we want x to be. Right now it's at 0. That kind of looks okay. Let's just go with that.
All right.
Okay. And we also need to make sure that when we create the clone that we do it correctly. So what I actually want to do so that I know exactly who we are here is that I want to I've got 2 things that identify myself. One is the name of my costume and the other is the number of rows and columns to select. So when we make a clone, because we're going to make 2 of them, I need to know which clones I'm working with to begin with. So we have to say if, and we're going to do an if then else. If, and I believe you can look at the costume name itself. Where's the costume? Costume number is equal to 1. Then we can do something, we can make it the medium one, right? So we're going to then switch the costume to medium. We're going to set the rows to select and set the columns to select. And what should these numbers be?
These numbers should be 4 by 5.
4 and 5, okay? And the other thing we're going to need to do is to move it down. So we need to change the y by, I don't know, what it might be about 40 maybe, something like that. We'll see how that looks. Now, it turns out we're going to change that y on both cases, so we could actually put that down there. But otherwise, we do need to make sure we do this. Switch costume to large, and set the rows to select, and set the column. Oh, we want columns to select here, right? Columns to select. And what are the numbers that should be here?
5 and 6.
5 and 6. All right. Should we see what this does?
All right.
Easy enough. Let's get rid of those. We don't need to see those in that window. Let's click play. Oh, it went the wrong way.
You need to change the y by minus.
2 problems happened. Y should be going down instead of up, so we need that to be a negative number. It's a little too small, to 40. We're going to have to make that a little bigger. And we didn't ever get to the second case because we didn't create a clone of the medium, right? So let's make sure that we fix all those things. First, we need to create a clone of myself here in the medium case to make it large. And second, we need to make sure that we get this change here to be a little bit bigger, something like that. So now we have a small and a medium. This came in, it should have made another clone of itself, which switched to large. That's it. You know what the problem is? We do need to move this here. It needs to do it here because it needs to move first. The large is there, but it's behind it. So let's make sure we do that and make another one of those.
All right.
We don't need that one. We do need that one. There, we've got it. A little too big. Let's put a little less space in there. Let's try like 65.
There we go.
We've got our small, medium, and large. That's the very first thing we need to do. It's been about the right amount of time for us to take a break. Go ahead, if you're watching us do this and you're trying to play along, go ahead and make sure you can get these buttons in there as well. And we'll work on the logic to go over to the tiles themselves in the next one. Sound good? I know this is a good start. We're going to just keep going until we have the full thing in front of us. You can certainly do this on your own, and I think you'll have a lot of fun doing it. Thanks for listening to this one. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.